been a while, but we are back here at the SAP Performance Facility for 49ers Live Looking, and I'm here. Now, I'm serious when I say this, with one of my favorite people from the organization, 49ers radio color analyst Tim Ryan, and this is why. I tell everyone the same story. It was one of my first road trips 2 seasons ago, and on the team plane, I'm assigned a seat next to you. So we take off, we're in the air, and you have your tablet open. You're going through plays from the previous game. You're going through plays of who were playing that Sunday. And I'm just like listening, and just the way you were dissecting plays, you quickly became one of my favorite people, especially people to sit next to on a plane. And
yeah, there you go.
I think I became your favorate person because I'm so small.
That's right. There's a lot of elbow room. Can I get up on your box with you?
There we go. There we go.
Let me stand up on your box with you. There you go. Well, it's good to be with you, and you got to do your homework. You know that.
Yeah.
And especially in the preseason, because you've got so many guys that are new players on not only the 49ers, but on the opponent. And you got to know the opponent, in my opinion, when you do a telecast in the preseason, even though you're doing it for the home fans. Mm-hmm. So it's just, I learned that in 4th grade. Thank goodness I had good study skills in elementary school.
So we're coming off of a preseason game. 49ers, it came with its troubles. 6 49ers went out in the game with an injury, all not too serious aside from tackle Sean Coleman, who was placed on IR yesterday. But I've seen the Twitter timelines. I've talked to some fans. I actually had an event yesterday, and fans are ready to push that panic button. Is it safe to tell them, slow down? Not yet.
Yeah, it's preseason football now. And even if some guys and a few select guys aren't ready by the opener at Tampa Bay, I still wouldn't press the panic button. I think the best thing about this team is when you watch them, and all you got to do is watch the special teams period and see who's lining up on the kickoff team, who's lining up on the punt team. And you got a lot of good young football players on this team that translate into good replacement players when you have some injuries. So there's a lot of depth, and I think depth that they can withstand, and we'll all keep our fingers crossed at the key position, which is quarterback. Absolutely. As we all know that that position stays healthy, but no time to panic.
Good. Don't press the panic button just yet. Let's step off to the side, let everyone see what's going on behind us here at – actually, this is our final training camp practice here at the SAP Performance Facility, as the 49ers will have their joint practices in Denver later on this week, but we'll get into that a little bit later. I do want to give some injury updates. Kyle Shanahan spoke with the media following Saturday's contest. Linebacker Elijah Lee had thumb surgery, and he's expected to be out for 2 weeks. Defensive lineman DJ Jones suffered a knee sprain. He will be week to week. He's not out here today. He's on the sidelines. Running back Raheem Mostert left the game in the first quarter with a head injury. He is currently in concussion protocol. Safety Marcel Harris had a stinger, but good to go. He's back out here on the field today. Offensive lineman Najee Tarian had a negative x-ray on his hand. He's expected to be back, and I believe he's out here today as well. And then finally, a guy we didn't see in the game is Jimmy Ward. The 49ers are hopeful they get him back ahead of these joint practices. He's still in the blue non-contact jersey out here, not quite in the individual or team drills yet, but working his way back. He will have an x-ray this week. And then there was one that we all found out about during the game, and that was Trent Taylor and the stress fracture on his foot. Expected to be out 4 to 6 weeks with that injury. Not quite ruling out a week 1 return, but I guess we're being patient with Trent Taylor's return.
There's question marks there. I've had that same procedure on my foot when I was a player. And the only silver lining to it is that it's happening now, relatively early in training camp. In a perfect world, they would have realized it earlier, and he would have realized it earlier and would have got it taken care of. And he was having a tremendous training camp. Yeah. So can't wait to get him back. And I think both said the same thing in terms of Nick and his availability week 1 at Tampa Bay. But just like I was talking about a minute ago, this team has quality depth. Guys that you're not talking about that aren't out here. D Ford is going to be fine. And D Ford is a lethal pass rusher and is going to be a difference maker on this football team. I do believe Eric Armstead and his calf injury will be available. So they're going to get a lot of the good players back and the frontline players, and I'm hoping Verrett can get healthy.
Absolutely.
There's another injury you have to talk about now. The biggest injury of the weekend, of course, was to Sean Coleman.
Yeah.
And they were really looking – the guy was a former third-round pick of the Cleveland Browns. We all know the adversity he's had in his life, and a survivor of leukemia from a young age. Tell you what, he looks the part getting off the bus. He's every bit of 6'5", 310 pounds. He's got length. He's got mobility. And this is a difficult offense to process, and you got to process fast with their tempo. And when his processing was on, and for a lot of young players, it's not always on. he was really, really good as a swing tackle. And that Keiana is the first tackle in the game if you have an injury on either side. So if McGlinchey went down at right, he'd go in at right. If Joe went down at left, he'd go in at left. That's why they call him the swing tackle. He can swing side, from one side to the other. So that's a big loss because he was going to fill that role that Gary Gilliam tried to fill over the last couple of years, but had his own issues with injuries. So I think getting Sam Young in here, a guy who's played, who's been in NFL games, and if anything, he's a freaking mountain to get around. I mean, he is a huge human being that is going to be out there trying to claim that swing tackle position. So my hopes are that Sean gets back, gets healthy, and has a nice future in this game.
You're talking about depth, and I do want to jump back to wide receiver. Okay, so say the 49ers they're cautious with Trent Taylor's return. Maybe he's not quite back by week 1 or week 2, but what does this mean for the wide receiver group? Because that was, coming into camp, probably one of the most intriguing position battles.
Well, they're trying to, they got to replace Pierre Garçon from last year, and the young guys have got to step up their level of play. They weren't healthy last year, with the exception of Kendrick Bourne, who finished strong, and I expect Kendrick Bourne to have a nice year. I really do. Dante was nicked a good portion of the year, and then got hurt again in the Chicago game. Trent Taylor was never right with his back all season long. So it's about those young guys, in my opinion, taking the next step forward. And I think they'll be able to do that. And in particular, Kendrick Bourne. And I know Dante Pettis, there's going to be a lot to be asked of him, and like to see him separate from the rest of the packs because he's so talented. But Kendrick Bourne does a lot of dirty work down the middle of the field, so I think, and has a desire to do that. And is always downhill. If you watch him catch the ball, he's always got a body lean headed for your goal line. So rarely is he going to get knocked back. He's going to get you some extra first downs doing that. And then the young guys, what can you say? I'll start with the higher draft pick only because he was picked higher in Deebo Samuel, who's another guy who's going to get dirty in between the numbers. He has got no fear when you put him on routes that are going to the middle of the field. And Keiana, he changes gears when he catches the ball. And that's why you saw all that stuff from college, all that yards after the catch stuff that he put up. He is phenomenal. And, again, a guy with the right attitude that wants to go get it. Then Jalen Hurd, who I think could end up having as big an impact as any rookie in the league this year when you look at what his skill sets are. He plays receiver / tight end / H-back / running back / slot receiver with the mentality of a running back and an aggressive running back. And what he did as a high school running back was phenomenal in Tennessee. Then going on to Tennessee and putting up some incredible numbers, both running and catching and running with the football. And then a bit of a head issue with the concussion. He ends up at Baylor. And he's got a nasty mentality to play the game, and his skill sets are ridiculous. And, again, it goes with that mentality. He's my size. He's 6'4", 235 pounds. And is capable of being 245, so you can move him even a little closer to the line of scrimmage. But I guess my point with him is you love all that stuff, but he's so versatile, and you put him on the field in a 2-receiver set with he and George Kittle, or 3-receiver set with George Kittle and with Tevin Coleman in the backfield. We'll call it 11 personnel, 1 running back, 1 tight end. How do you treat him? Do you treat him as a wideout? And in terms of how you're going to line up on defense, are you going to play nickel? Great. Put a nickel corner on him and see what happens. And especially depending on the down and distance, put a nickel corner on him, and they'll run a run right there. The 49ers will off the edge. Are you going to count him as a tight end and put a linebacker on him and keep your base out there? Good luck with that, with his skill sets and his ability to get away. So he's going to present a lot of problems. And Kyle and his coaching staff know how to exploit matchups as good as anybody or better than most in pro football. So I'm looking for him to have a really good year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what stood out, obviously, that 2-touchdown performance in his NFL
Made
debut.
that back shoulder fade look easy.
It's so easy.
And then the first touchdown when he ran over Kayvon Frazier from about the 5-yard line, that's the running back mentality I was talking about. He would not be denied, and you love to see that.
Absolutely. 49ers sat 29 starters. Going into this first preseason contest. How do you see the team kind of addressing this second preseason game, given the injuries and with the number of starters set?
Yeah, and I know fans don't want to hear this, and I have no idea what the plan is, and I know the guys are going to go practice against them for a couple of days. I would be very cautious about playing anybody throughout the preseason. That's just my opinion, and I was a bit, I won't say critical, but a little bit taken back last year when Sean McVay of the Rams, I don't think he played 1 starter for 4 games the whole preseason. I was like, wow, man, guys don't even need to, get their pads under him anymore. But the more that I think about it, the more that I thought, and they did pretty good, as you know, last year as the NFC champion. The more that I think about it, and the more that in a salary cap world and the way draft picks are, and it's really about 5 to 10 players, maybe, of guys that these guys, coaches want to know, can they play? Can they be a contributor and make this football team on the top 53? I'm for letting those guys play as much as you can get them to play, because if they make the team, hopefully they're not playing a lot during the preseason or during the regular season as backups. So I want to see as much as I can see on those guys. And to me, it's not worth putting your frontline players at risk. It's just not, especially if, like the other day, for example, the Cowboys played their ones. 49ers had all twos, and I will argue maybe a couple threes on the field.
Yeah.
So how, and it ended up being pretty darn good play, but how clean is the play going to be? You're going to have a guy that's a college free agent corner that's got no chance of making a football team guarding your number one receiver and falls into his leg on the top end of a route and tears his ACL out. I mean, to me, the risk is not worth the reward. And then the caveat to it all is you've got to get great work in at practice. Yeah. And that's one thing I've noticed from this year versus the last couple of years under this regime is the amount of football practice, not drilling practice, not individual practice. They're doing drills right now, and they're going through their warm-ups, and they'll do that for 20, 25 minutes or whatever. But there's a lot of situational football being played at practice every day they're in pads, which is, you can work all the red zone stuff. And it's football. They're ones against ones, ones against twos, short yardage, long yardage, coming out of your goal line, going into your goal line, red zone both ways. So you get great work here and feel satisfied about it. And I don't know what they're going to do, but I wouldn't put a lot of the guys I expect to be there against Tampa on the football field. I just wouldn't do it.
In case you're just tuning in, we've got a 49ers radio color analyst Tim Ryan here with us for your 49ers Live Look-In. So let's talk a little bit more about Saturday's game. You said there were a lot of twos, there were threes that played, but were there any under-the-radar guys that kind of stood out to you on Saturday?
Yeah, a couple guys. I mean, how about the guy that they just signed the day of the game, Brandon
Running
Wiles?
back, right.
And not only, and he had fresh legs, and there's no secret to why he and Valoga both look faster than everybody else.
That's true.
That's called fresh legs. They have not been in training camp, and Valoga did a great job with a couple of sacks. So we'll see what he can do. But Brandon Wiles, where I was impressed with him was, north and south, getting up the field, hitting the hole. I mean, and in this offense, you got to read the block in front of you and then hit the hole, cut it back or press it forward. He did that with decisiveness. He ran over the safety a couple of times, and where I was impressed on a pass play, he went the right way in protection and was able to pick up whoever the blitzer was, whether it was a linebacker or a safety. So he did a nice job. Not a lot of people are talking about DeMontre Moore on defense, who was a former third-round pick of the Giants out of A&M and has, I think, been on 6 teams, including the AAF or whatever that league was in the spring. I think he's had a really good camp. And if it's not here, I think it'll be somewhere. He'll be on a 53-man roster. So I was excited for the game that he had. Azeez Al-Shahir did a nice job, of course, getting to the football.
Undrafted guy.
Like seeing that. There was a lot of good things to talk about. I thought Antone Exum did a nice job, had a solid game. I think one guy that they're glad got a lot of action, and probably a lot of people aren't looking at him as a guy on the roster. Come September, I think he's got a shot and got a lot of work the other night, is Emmanuel Mosley.
Oh, that's another one.
And he was out there, there was several targets thrown his way in the game, several opportunities to be a force in the run game. I know it's killing him that he missed the blitz when Robert Saleh sent him as a free runner and called a great blitz, and he whiffed on the quarterback. I know that bothered him. He'll learn from that to break down and attack the right hip of the quarterback. So he's a guy that, especially when you look at K'Wan Williams and his injury and his availability for week 1. So there could be a roster battle between Emmanuel Mosley and DJ Reed, who also did nothing to hurt his chances. So there's a great competition there.
Tim, you're a defensive guy, played D-tackle. So, we've got to talk about the D-line. What's been your impressions? Now we're in week 3 of training camp, but what's been your impression not only with the guys whose names we know, the Nick Bosas, the D Fords, the DeForest Buckners, but also some of the guys that might be a little further down the depth chart that got to see some extra snaps on Saturday?
A couple things. Well, DeMontre Moore being one of those guys. And I'll start with the coach, Chris Kasarik, and love the scheme that Robert Saleh has morphed this defense into. And some of that's Chris Kasarik and his history with playing those defensive ends and those wide 9 techniques, which means they're outside shade of the tackle. They're not in no man's land out there. They're outside of the end player on the line of scrimmage for the offense. They're tilted in, and they are running off the rock. It is all about getting off the football. And the best defensive linemen, in my opinion, are the ones that play on the other side of the ball, on the line of side of the line of scrimmage of the offense. You've got to get across the line of scrimmage and start getting that run disjointed a little bit in some of those blocks. So I love the scheme for these guys. I thought Sheldon Day did a great job. He has a knack for making plays. I mean, that may have been a touchdown, the ball that he batted down against the first team offense of the Cowboys. So he did a really good job for himself. Julian Taylor is very heavy-handed, very strong, is understanding this concept. A lot of this, too, now with the way that Kasarik is teaching it, they're flying to the backfield. They're getting to the edge of the blockers, but then they've got to use their vision and their feel and their instincts on what's happening. If the guy blocks down that you're outside shit, you don't just keep running up the field. So they've got to be – their vision and their instincts and a lot of repetition going on over in their drills has got to be on point. So you'll see, and Julian Taylor is getting really good at that. And plus, he's just so powerful. I want to see Streets play more. Baby Hulk, I think, is so talented in terms of his skill sets because he's just so strong and explosive in the phone booth, in short areas. So I want to see him play a little bit more. Kevin Gibbons is a natural, short, quick, and thick. Not a lot of D linemen in today's game that are built like him at 6'1", 285. Which you would consider undersized, weight and height. He doesn't have real long arms, but he is a natural football player, so I've been impressed with him. He'd be a good developmental player to keep around.
So you've been out here just about every training camp practice, and everyone wants to know, how's Nick Bosa looking? How is he doing? And I want to know, number one, what's been your take on Bosa in the short time that we did get to see him?
He plays stronger and looks bigger than 266 pounds.
Is.
That's number one. I mean, skies out, thighs out, and his thighs are always out. He's got massive, massive legs, and he's got quickness to him, and quickness, in short areas out of his stance, and he can also run quick. He's got speed to him. So really impressive, well coached. Clearly has an arsenal of moves. His hand-eye coordination is everything that it was, and all the hype on the hand-eye coordination and how he throws moves. And there's real talent to being a pass rusher. All that stuff's true. I think where I'm most impressed, it's kind of like I'll use a receiver and a cornerback analogy. A corner's got a 6-yard cushion on the receiver at the line of scrimmage. He's not impressed. What they want receivers to do is close that gap on that corner as fast as you can. Step on his toes get him in a position where he can't get out of your way because you're on him that quick. They call it stepping on his toes and then make your break. That's what he does to offensive linemen, and it's really the same concept. They hit in the pass set, and they want to keep that space in between them and the defender and get their long arms out there and punch and grab and do whatever they have to do to keep the guy from their edges. He closes a gap and steps on toes of offensive linemen as quick as anybody that I've seen. It's really impressive, his first step quickness and his pad level and all that. So he was having a tremendous camp. Hopefully he's going to be ready sooner rather than later with that ankle.
Now, you talk about his technique, his motor, his polish. Coaches don't like to praise rookies so early, but is there anybody you can maybe think about that maybe you played against or you've watched that you could compare Nick to?
Wow. He's just so talented that I didn't play with a lot of defensive linemen that were the number 2 overall pick. I mean, I played with great ones, Dan Hampton, Steve McMichael, Richard Dent, all different in their own way. Played with a guy named Trace Armstrong who's taller than Nick. Played with him in Chicago, and he ended up playing in Miami and finishing up, played a long time. He was really good at his technique and, when the arms and the legs work together, how to turn your ankles certain ways when you want to pursue and redirect in one direction or the other. Just really efficient with his movements. I wouldn't compare their games, but I would compare their approach to the game. I could make a comparison there. And again, it's just been in practice.
Yeah.
So we got to see it on Sundays if it's real, because a lot of guys can shine. And it's hard to make plays in practice, but a lot of guys can shine until it's game time. I don't anticipate him not shining, but there will be some rookie growing pains for sure, too, with Nick. But the sky's the limit for him just because he's so talented, so strong. And then you mentioned it, he's got the motor. And that's probably the biggest thing. When you mix a red line motor, a guy who's got his gas pedal pinned all the time, you mix that with superior talent, then you end up with great players because he doesn't always have to be right. If an offensive lineman, and they all make mistakes, makes a mistake on him and they lean too much one way or they get their feet too close together, or there's some breakdown in their technique, his motor exploits it every time because his motor just powers right. They're stuck. They can't because his motor's going, which that to me is maybe the most impressive thing about him.
So we'll be waiting to see how Nick kind of progresses with his health. But obviously, day one starter for Nick. Are there any other rookies that you look at and you're like, that guy belongs on the field versus Tampa Bay?
Wow. Yeah, I would say the receivers. Those they've got a chance. One of them certainly has a chance to start. Maybe two of them, depending on how they line it up. So those guys, I think, without question. And then on defense, if Nick's available, I'd say him. Although I think maybe even early on, depending on if Tampa starts in their nickel, it would be D Ford on one side and him on the other. If it was there's ways that they would line it up. Dre Greenlaw's got a chance. I know they love the way he plays. He's really smooth. He's fundamentally sound. He's got a great instinct for the football and a nose for the football. So you couple that with Malcolm's injury and now Eli's injury, and he may have earned it anyway, but by default, he may have an opportunity to be out there.
So we talked a little bit about the D-line. We talked about the receivers. Is there a position group now? What is this, our 13th training camp practice, but is there a position that still stands out to you as the biggest question mark on the roster?
It's got to be interior offensive line. There's no question about that. Still question marks at the safety position with Jimmy's injury, and I'd be cautious with him too, and I know the doctors will. Break a clavicle, even though it's healed, they're still not back to full strength. And that's a man's game out there, and Jimmy plays it like a man. So you may have to protect Jimmy from Jimmy and keeping him out as long as you can until you feel great about that thing being healed. And Tavarius, there's a lot of moving pieces in the middle of that defense on the back end. But I would say, a lot of good players that are vying for it. I'd say offensive line, number one, offensive line depth is a problem anyway around the league. Mm-hmm. It's just hard to have that 7th and 8th offensive lineman that you feel great about because a lot of guys coming out of college, they're just not ready to go. It's a different – say what you want with the spread and the up – it's still a different game. They're all coming out of 2 points. They're all pass protecting for a second and a half. The ball's gone. That's not this game. So it's hard to develop those guys. So Richburg's injury, in the hopes he's ready, at least Garland knows the system. But then you start, Person will be fine at right guard. But Garnett's hurt. Talked about Najee a little while ago with an opportunity for him. And he's got to step up his play for sure and is capable of doing it. And he's having a nice training camp. But I would say interior O-line and O-line depth is the biggest challenge.
So we mentioned it earlier, the final training camp practice here at the SAP Performance Facility. Final one will be here at least. And then the 49ers will head to Denver for joint practices against the Broncos on Friday and Saturday. So as we wind down the final minute of our live look-in, what does Tim Ryan look for going to a joint practice? What do you have?
Hopefully a lot of fights. That's always the good part about going on someone else's field.
Okay.
And I'll say this. We were there, I want to say 3 years ago. 49ers were there, I think, when Chip was here. Yep. And literally they bullied the 49ers all over the field. When Aqib Talib was still there, and they had a couple of guys that are very aggressive, to say the least. And there was a lot of scraps, and they threw – it was ugly. They threw 7 or 8 touchdowns that day. It was not fun. Next day, the 49ers came and got a little bit of redemption. So I know it'll be spirited. They've been in camp a week longer with playing in the Hall of Fame game. I think at least there's, a great relationship between John Lynch and John Elway and Kyle and all the familiarity with the Denver folks. Yep. They'll be above board. They'll do it right. We'll do it right. So I hope there's not a lot of fights. I was just, tongue-in-cheek. I hope there's a lot of good quality play, and we're going to get a lot of opportunity to see a lot of one-on-ones and competing against another team's jersey and want to see them execute.
And you'll be there with us, right, in Denver?
I will. Oh, yeah.
Can we get you back for the live look? And this has been fun.
Yeah, no problem.
We got to do this again sometime.
Yeah, you bet.
There it is. We are going to wrap it up here at the SAP Performance Facility. Make sure you tune in Friday. We will be live in Denver for the joint practices with the Broncos. With that, make sure you guys stay tuned to 49ers.com for everything training camp and the 49ers preseason, and enjoy your Monday. Thanks, guys.